Good afternoon. This is Dr. Dennis L. Waters Sr. I am, according to the information I received in regard to this program that I'm doing, this is a live broadcast that is going out over Facebook. I'm not sure which page it's going out over. I'll investigate that in a few moments to see actually which of my pages it is going out over. But I wanted to move past my own inhibitions to be live and to just simply broadcast. The reason for that is that we're living in a time that I'm convinced that we have basically tools that make it possible for us to move forward and to actually accomplish, let's say to be, to do, to have, basically anything that we can conceive in our minds. A few years ago, there was this statement: anything that a person can conceive, believe, they can achieve. And at that time, when I initially heard that, I really did not grasp that that item was actually something that applied to me or that it was true. My self-awareness was not at the time where it is today. Today, I'm convinced that there had at that time been individuals who had moved ahead of my consciousness. They were already in that space where this was true for them, and they were broadcasting. They were teleporting themselves into what would be my future, and they were sending a message back to me to let me know that what you, Dennis L. Waters, could believe, what you actually could believe and conceive in your mind, that you would also be able to achieve in your life. And that's what I'd like to do for any individual that actually listens, pays attention, is aware in their present moment in this particular time. Why? Because of the aspect that I have actually made real in my life. This particular experience, not only have I made it real in my life, I've seen it made real and helped it to become real in the lives of so many individuals. My story is on one level, it is a grand story. It is just an absolute miraculous story. I know this story. I lived this story. I know what this story is. And I know it is something that has come about strictly as a matter of belief. I have seen it played out over and over and over again. And I am more than confident that any person that can come up with a story in their mind that they are willing to actually commit themselves to by dreaming it over and over again, by believing it over and over again, by repeating it over and over again, that they are actually able, no matter what it is, how it is that they process it in their minds, they're able to actually bring that to pass. They're able to bring that to pass. And the key thing is that they actually have a desire within their minds, within their hearts, within their spirit, have a clear desire that they are articulating as to what it is that they want to bring forth and manifest in their life, for their life, or as their life, however they want to articulate that particular desire and bring that forth for their life. My particular story, there are just so many dynamics of it, so many parts of it that ring true for this particular experience. I can think of the aspect of, as a high school student, that I actually started at one high school, and I remember now that I wanted to go to college. I had not known how to go to college, but in the 8th grade, I had an individual that gave me a test. gave me a test. And when they looked at the results from that test, they determined that even though there were individuals, I found out later, that were actually seeking to say that based on where a person was living, the neighborhood that they were in and that they lived in, that was used as a determiner as to whether or not they were intelligent and should be considered for school or college. They were making those kinds of judgments, and I was not living in that particular neighborhood or in those particular neighborhoods that should be considered. But an individual gave me a test, and that individual actually looked at the results of that test and then decided, based on that test that I had taken, that I had the potential to go to college. And then told me about it. That was the amazing thing. They told me about my potential, my aptitude for college classes. And this was in the 8th grade. One of the teachers, if I remember correctly, was a lady named Mrs. Bonet. Ms. Bonnet, perhaps, was the pronunciation of her name. But she told me about it. There were two of them, actually, that told me about it and spoke with me day after day after day when I was in the 8th grade at the time at a school called Carver Middle School, if you will, or junior high school, as we called it at that time. And she told me about it, that I could go to college, and continued to tell me about it. And they were with me both in the 8th grade and in the 9th grade, and continued to tell me about it. When I went to the 10th grade, I saw that many of my classmates that I had had in those previous years, the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, that they were no longer in the same class with me. And then I transferred to a different school when I was in the 11th grade and in the 12th grade. And that was amazing. Afterwards, I joined the Army. I joined the Army with the intent after high school that I would be able to go to college, because there was such a thing as what they call the GI Bill. And it made it possible to do two things that I wanted to do. One was to get a college education, because there were finances that would come as a result of going into the Army and then getting out. And of course, during that time, I was what was called, it was during the time of what they called the Vietnam War. It was during the time of what they called the Vietnam War. Of course, that meant you had to either go to Vietnam, and if you survived Vietnam, then you'd be able to get a college education using the GI Bill, or not be sent to Vietnam. And then again, you still had to survive and get out of the military, and then you'd be able to go to college. Well, I did not go to Vietnam. Can't say that was my particular path. And then I did get out of the military. But even there were things that occurred that initially detoured my route that I would have to take. While I was in the military, before actually I got in the military, one of the things that happened was that I was initially denied entrance into the military. And that was because I am a person who was born initially with double thumbs on my right hand. I have what are called double thumbs on my right hand. There's a scientific name for that, but basically I have two fingernails on my right hand. And when I went to be tested, physically and mentally tested, for the military, for the Army, I was initially denied entry into the military. And the doctor told me that I could not enter into the military. But it was interesting because he also said, come back in about 6 months, we will have a specialist look and test you again and see if you are able to go into the military. And they said, he's not here at this particular time. We'll be able to give you a test, and he'll be able to tell you if you can enter the military. And actually, even before that, I had asked my mother to sign for me to go into the military. Not my father, my mother to sign for me to go in the military. And my father would not do it at all. My mother wouldn't do it at all either. And then when I had to turn 18, and then that's when I actually went in and said, there was the denial of my entry into the military at that time. 6 months later, I went back. I did see the specialist. The specialist told me, and this is a major thing. It's about making a decision. It's a major thing. The specialist told me, he looked at my double thumbs, and then he gave me an exercise. He gave me an exercise. What he said was, I want you to touch each of your fingers on your hand with your thumb, and I want you to use each of your fingernails to touch your fingers. So I had to use each fingernail and touch my thumb. And then after I had done that, he gave me a choice. This was a choice. The choice was simply this. He said that I can cut your thumb off, and I can place another thumb there, prosthesis. I can place another thumb there, and it will look good, but it won't work as well as the thumb you have now. Or you can keep the thumb that you have. It does not look the same as everybody else. It does not look like what they call a normal thumb, but it works. Now, that was an important statement for me because of the fact that as a young man growing up, of course, you go out on dates and meet people and all of those kinds of things. And I had the experiences where there were individuals that I was out on date with. I had to cover up my thumbs or felt I had to cover them up. And then there were others who would laugh and joke about my thumbs. I even had the incident in my younger life, maybe when I was 8 or 9, where my friends, understand it, they were my friends, where they tried to cut my thumbs apart, one from the other, because I was different from them. And they wanted me to be like them. They wanted me to be normal like them. And here was an opportunity that a surgeon was saying to me, I can have an operation that would make me normal, so to speak. I would look normal like everybody else, and I could also go into the military. Or I could keep the thumb I had. What would you decide? What would you decide? Well, I decided I would keep my thumb. And he signed a paper that I could go into the military. And I went into the military. That's what happened with me. I went into the military. And instead of going to Vietnam, I went to a place called Germany. Now, I'll tell you later about my experiences in Germany, but I went to a place called Germany. And I served in Germany, got out of Germany, and then eventually went to school, went to college. My way to college, I had actually applied to schools when I was in high school, and I did not initially go to those schools, but I did go to a college, and I did graduate the first time from a college. I graduated from a college. I graduated as a minister, got a BA degree, graduated from college the first time. So it was a dream that had actually come to pass. This dream is a very interesting dream. Now, understand, I'm the first child of my mother and father who graduated from high school. I had 4 older sisters. I'm the 5th child of 9. I have 4 older sisters. I'm the first son of my mother. And first son of my mother and father together. And I have 4 older sisters. I'm the first one that graduated from high school, and of course the first one that graduated from college as well. That was amazing in and of itself. When I came out of high school, I wanted to go to college, and I initially had applied to colleges, one that my uncle had attended, my uncle Eddie Lee, who had attended Hampton University, and I believe I had applied for Howard University. I had studied those particular schools, and I wanted to attend, and I believe I applied to both of them, and I believe I was accepted to both of those universities. But as I said, I went into I went into the Army because I did not perceive that I had the funds to be able to go to college. And so I went into the Army in order to do that. And also, I did not have proper advising as far as I knew, as far as I understand. None of my siblings had gone to school. No one really around me was really advising me about what to do. And therefore, I thought my best bet was to go into the military in order to get the GI Bill. And that's what I did. Perhaps you've had that experience. Perhaps you can relate to what I'm speaking about in regard to that when you see your options and you look at them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, however many options you have, and you look at that and then you choose the best option for you. Well, going into the military was the best option for me, and it made it possible for the dream that I had of school, going to college, to actually come to pass. And that's my point, is that you dream something, you believe it, you then move about through a process, and then you achieve it. And I actually was able to go to college and get a degree. I got a degree as a minister, and that was an amazing thing. My thing was that I wanted to get a degree. Now, the additional thing about that is that years later, when I came out of the military also, I wanted to go to Howard University. I again got accepted to Howard University. I walked on the campus of Howard University, but was just really initially overwhelmed at the grandeur of Howard University. I walked on what they call the yard, I believe it is, where the center campus is, and was just overwhelmed because I had read about this grand school and the scholars that had been there, the individuals who had impacted society, and everything I had read about it, and I was just overwhelmed. And I walked off again. I didn't talk to anybody really, and there was no one around me who had gone to the school. This was even after being in the military, and then I walked off the campus and did not go back. I had other things that were pressing me at a particular time, and I walked off and did not go back until years later. And at the point that I did go back, I had been a minister, and I had, at that point, had served in the ministry for over 20 years. And at that point, when I went back, I had actually purchased a book by a person that I did not know was connected to Howard University. That person had written a book called Troubling Biblical Waters. I was serving as a pastor of a church. I was actually in a city called Petersburg, Virginia. I was also serving at a college called Virginia State University as the religion coordinator there at Virginia State University. And I purchased a book. The book was entitled Troubling Biblical Waters. And it was written by a Dr. Kane Holtfelder. The book was a difficult book to read. A difficult book to read. I read that book over and over and over again, trying to understand and to grasp the concepts that were in the book over and over again. And basically what was written in the book was, at the time, it was seeking to help me as an African American male to understand that people of African descent were found in the Bible. It was the translation of the Bible that made it difficult for people of African descent to actually understand that the English translation that we were reading actually contained words that were of African origin. It made it difficult. And so to find ourselves in the text itself, he had written this book, Troubling Biblical Waters, and it had to do with the translation of the biblical text. And there's much that is in that writing that as I began to read the original language and the translation of various words, and he deals with the concept of justice there, dekosune, inside of the text. All of those things open up worlds for me at that time and still to this very day. And later, I had the joy of once more going to Howard University, this time after I had read that book. And it was magical, if you will, divine appointment, if you will, that I went this time to study as a student who was in the Doctor of Ministry program. I was in that program. And my professor, one of them initially, was a man whose name was Dr. Kane Hope Felder, the writer of the book called Troubling Biblical Waters. And I remember being in class with him, and he was like all individuals who are just geniuses. In my estimation, again, an eccentric professor. He had his own idiosyncrasies, but brilliant, yes, to me. And I remember being in class and sitting before class, and we had an assignment where we had written out our understanding of a text. And he, as he was reviewing me and my text before the class, he affirmed that I had grasped what he had written in that book, Troubling Biblical Waters. He affirmed it before the class. And then another thing that occurred is that one day, I was visiting him, came to see him, made the appointment, went to see him, and visited him in his class, in his office. I made an appointment, came down to his office, went up to his office. He was like on the second floor of the building, I believe, something to that effect. And I went up to see him, and I had my list of questions in respect to him. Didn't want to waste his time, and probably didn't want to waste mine, but more importantly, didn't want to waste his time at that time. And therefore, went to his office, and then in his office, I asked my questions. He was very patient and everything. And when I finished, he said, "Do you know why you have come here?" And I said, "Yes, I came here to ask you my set of questions." And he said, "No. You came here because I want you to be my graduate assistant." And that day I became the graduate assistant of Dr. Kane Hope Felder. I served as his graduate assistant for that year. It was an amazing assignment to be his graduate assistant. I respect the man, love the man, because of his scholarship, because of what he did with that book and with his writings and everything. As I said, eccentric, he goes through his processes as far as writing, which any scholar or any mystic or any individual that is an inventor or creative, all of them that I have studied, and my own idiosyncrasies as far as creativity are concerned, he is just one of those individuals, as I am. And this idea of what you can believe, what you can conceive, that you can achieve, is very much in line with this idea that you conceive something, you believe it, you then bring it to pass. It's a process that's unique, and that's what I mean by eccentric or this aspect of the idiosyncrasies of this is something that is unique to you, because you are bringing something out of the visible or invisible into the visible. It doesn't exist on this plane as of yet, as it pertains to you. And what you are doing is that you're bringing it from the invisible into the visible. And the challenge is to believe that which is invisible. As the text says, as the Bible says, the things that are made, the things that are seen now, were not originally seen. It didn't mean, and it does not mean that they do not exist. They just don't exist as far as being seen in this third dimensional world. They exist in the mind of God. They exist in the fourth dimension. They exist in one's imagination, but you must hold them like an architect holds a picture in his or her mind. Like the individual that gave the idea to the architect to begin with holds the idea in his or her mind. Like the artist holds the picture in his or her mind. Like anybody who is creative. And what we're talking about is having an individual to have an idea of his or her best life, what we call their 4D life. And it can be called your authentic life, your real life, the real you. It can be called your Christ life, your Buddha life. You can call it being self-actualized. Carl Jung called it the individuation. You can call it winning the prize, being your best, whatever you want to call it. The goal is really the same. It's coming to the end of the hero's journey. It's all the same. And then there was a statement that years ago said, all roads lead to Rome. And it wasn't just simply talking about Rome as a physical location. It was really talking about the aspect that all roads lead to the same place. All paths lead to the same place. So I want to postulate to you that all roads lead to the same place is talking about the aspect that there's one individual that you are. And pretty much every path that you may have known, whether it is a path that is called for some a religious path or a spiritual path, that path was birthed with the idea that it will get you there. It will get you to the person that you were designed to be. Now, over the course of time, people may have forgotten that that's what the path is designed for. They may have forgotten that. But that's where there's a need for remembrance of that, putting it back together, putting the members back together in your mind, putting that back together. There's a need for that. And to remember, and then after you have membered them back together, to actually work those memories or work those members. Because this is, as I said, this is a time and this is a moment where all things are possible. All things are possible for you, for me, for others. All things are possible for us today. More than ever before, all things are possible. And I just want to really invite you to step into that space where you're living the life that you were designed to live. So think about that for a bit. We'll come back and talk with you a bit more and just have some thoughts about that. And we'll see where we go as we go forward and talk that a little bit more. So in a few, we will come back and we'll talk about some tools, some techniques, and some ideas that make that possible. If you have any questions, send me an email at info@iwillrestore.com, info@iwillrestore.com, and then we'll see what we do with all of this. Blessings. Bye-bye.